Hey there, everyone, and welcome to Pour and Explore, a wine, food, and travel podcast. I'm your host, Nick Elliott, the wine guy. I'd love to be your go-to guide for all things wine, food, and the amazing places they take us. Here on Pour and Explore, we'll sip, savor, and wander through the exciting world of wine, discuss incredible cuisines, and uncover the stories behind unforgettable destinations. Each week, I'll bring you lively conversations with wine experts, chefs, travel pros, and fellow enthusiasts. We'll share practical tips, hilarious tales, and plenty of inspiration to fuel your next adventure. So grab a glass, pull up a chair, and join me as we pour, explore, and celebrate the good life. Let's dive in. Hey everyone, welcome back to Pour and Explore, a wine, food, and travel podcast. I'm your host, Nick Elliott, your globe-trotting wine nerd and your passport to all things delicious and unforgettable. Today's episode is going to be a treat, especially if you've ever dreamed of jet-setting around the world, hearing wild stories from the skies, or traveling just a little bit deeper through connection, culture, and food. My guest today is Allie Murphy. Allie is a voice actor, she's a storyteller, and a former flight attendant with 14 years of international stories under her belt, and a voice you've probably heard, and even if you didn't even realize it. She's also the creator and host of the Red Eye podcast. Absolutely great to listen to, binge-worthy, beautifully produced show featuring outrageous, hilarious, and sometimes moving tales from the airline industry. In this episode today, we are going to talk with Allie and dive into everything from high-fiving Marvel producers and tucking Mariah Carey into bed, true story, and the power of food and culture in shaping the way we experience the world. We talk about India's joyful hospitality, the therapy of walking in the rain, and the unexpected life lessons that come from listening, really listening to the stories we all carry. And speaking of stories and travel, today's episode is also the perfect warm-up for a new adventure, and I'd love to invite you on. In 2025, we're going to be going to Australia and New Zealand. Two separate trips, but back-to-back March of next year, and we will talk a little bit more about that as we wrap up the show. And it's going to be a lot of fun, and I can't wait for you to come along with me to the lands down under. We're going to share a little bit of the juicy details at the end of the show, but in the meantime, let's talk with Allie and let's have a little bit of fun. All right, fantastic. Allie, thank you so much for being here today. Welcome to Pour and Explore.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Absolutely, absolutely. We talked about at the top of the show, you have done some really cool things in your life, and I want to talk all about them. I wish we had 5 hours to go over all of the stuff that you've done, but we're just going to touch on some of the great highlights from your amazing career. And again, I really appreciate you being on the show with me today. We love talking about wine on Pour and Explore. We love talking about food, but we wouldn't have half of those things if it wasn't for great travel and travel around the world. So let's talk a little bit about your time as a flight attendant. What is one story from your time working for the airlines that still, we're going to go in strong, a story that still makes your jaw drop?
Oh, that's a tricky one because I mean, the joys of travel and I guess the joys of life is that you come across all of the good and all of the bad. So I have crazy stories about we hit severe turbulence and we hit the ceiling of the plane and stuff, and people usually either like or hate to hear those kind of stories.
Right.
Or we get the really fun ones where, like, I had the executive producer of the Marvel movies on a flight once, and I got to hang out with him, and he was showing me some behind the scenes footage from the Iron Man movies, and I got to high five him and say he did an awesome job, which he thought was really funny. He said, "No one's ever high fived me before." I was like, "Really?" Like everyone should high five you for this.
Absolutely.
Or the time that I had Mariah Carey on a flight, and she was an absolute delight. She was lovely, but she was sat at the bar for a pretty long time, and I served her quite a lot of vodka. By the time she was done, I had to escort her, bless her, back to her bed. I had to put her stilettos on for her because she couldn't quite make it down that far, and escort her back to bed. And I put her into bed, tucked her in, said good night, and then 40 minutes later, she was back at the bar. So, so yeah, I have many stories. Yeah, it's hard to pick just one that makes the jaw drop because there's been quite a few in my time.
And we're going to talk about the podcast in just a couple of minutes. And you share a lot of these stories on the Red Eye podcast. And I appreciate you being here with me today, sharing some on Pour and Explore. One of the things that you say is that flight attendants have, quote, a lifetime of stories. Is there anything that hasn't made it to the podcast yet?
You know what? I'm pretty good at sharing. I'm a bit of an oversharer, which is why I have this podcast where I tell the true stories of what happened to me and what happened to other people that have donated their stories on flights. The only stuff I won't share is stuff that would make my mother ashamed of me or might get me up in jail. So that's the only things that I won't share of, I'm afraid. So yeah, I mean, there's very little I won't talk about because I do think that when you're a flight attendant, you're traveling the world every week. Like we've had literally 9 days at home base, and the rest of that month was abroad in different countries, experiencing different cultures and meeting different people. Those sort of experiences as a regular person that, isn't a flight attendant, you don't get that unless you get your 2 weeks vacation every year. That's the time that you meet all these people, but you get exposed to so many different experiences that you just can't help collect stories as you go along. And it's wonderful. It shapes you as a human. It shapes your opinions and it shapes the way that you live your life. It's quite incredible. There's some wonderful times. There's also some pretty sad times that you experience. But I was very lucky to get to do all that for 14 years and come out the other side alive and then start another career. So experiencing all those things is a complete blessing. And I encourage anyone to travel in any way that you can, even if it's just going for a walk around the block. Just get out the front door and look around and see what you can see, because there's always something special, even if it's just the buds opening on the trees or the sound of kids messing around in the sun or something. There's something to enjoy the minute you step outside of your door if you're just aware of it.
I love that. As you know from our first conversation, I agree with you wholeheartedly in what you're saying. And we talked a lot about that on this show about, getting out there and, whether it's around the block or around the world, get out of that little space that you're in. It really is the best education. I couldn't agree with that more. Let's stick with that cultural element for a second, because that really is at the heart of the reason that I travel and the reason that a lot of people travel is I want to experience new things, new cultures, new people, new food, new wine. Can you think of a cultural experience that really stands out in your mind in a place that you visited?
Yeah, I think the first one that comes to mind is if we ever visited India. If you visit at certain holidays, the greetings that you'd get would be absolutely incredible. I remember turning up one time and I think it was Diwali, and as we arrived at the hotel, the staff just were there greeting us. They looked so happy. It was so nice after a very long flight and working hard all night on your feet. It was really nice to be greeted by these wonderful people. And they put a little bit of red ash on our foreheads. And in our rooms were all these beautiful, sweet Indian treats. And everywhere you looked, there was color. They had drawn this beautiful colored rice piece of art in the lobby floor, and that was gorgeous. Going out and meeting locals and eating the food. I mean, I'm unfortunately now ruined for life. I cannot go to Indian restaurants outside of India because they're just not as good. The flavors there, the care that's put into their food. I mean, in the UK where I'm from, Indian restaurants tend to be, they're good, but they can be a bit greasy sometimes, or they'll just try and pack as much spice as they can into one dish to try and blow your head off. But in India, the flavors come through so much. And it was always my favorite thing going to India, and we'd go to some incredible rooftop restaurant in the middle of Delhi and share a meal. And it's always a really big table full of people all sharing meals. One of the things I remember most about my travels is the things that I ate and the social situation I was in at the time of me eating or drinking those things. So I think, yeah, that was my most loved cultural experience, was eating the food in India and experiencing some of the cultural differences there.
Yeah, it sounds like a beautiful experience, and I would agree with you. I've not been to India yet, but I've heard, living vicariously through some friends and family, that the food is just absolutely stunning, and it's nothing like, what we get here in the
No.
States, or what it sounds like you get in the UK either. So you were in the flight attendant business. You've been out of that for about 10 years, if I remember correctly.
Yeah, 9 years. Yeah, so close
Okay,
enough.
9 years, yeah. Thinking about how much more global, we've gotten in the last 9 years. If there was one last route that you would want to fly, where would that be?
I never got to go to South America. That was just not a route that my airline did, and I always was dying for them to just go to Rio or somewhere, just somewhere that was in South America, because it was the last continent apart from, Antarctica, that we didn't go to either. I always wanted to experience South American culture. I read a book when I was in my 20s that was about exploring South America and about spirituality there as well, and it really made me just yearn to be amongst the trees there and be in nature there. So yeah, that's the one place I never got to go. And I still haven't. I mean, I've left the airline 9 years. I've been free to travel wherever I want, and I still haven't been yet. So I should probably do something about that.
Understood, understood. I spent about a day and a half in Cartagena, Colombia one time. So that is my only South American experience. But my wife lived in Chile for a
Oh,
bit
wow.
and absolutely loved it there. And the stories that she brought back about the food and the people and the culture and so on. I agree with you. I cannot wait to get to South America. Obviously Argentinian wine is amazing.
Oh,
Chilean wine is amazing. I'm very, very much looking forward to that myself. All right, one more question about that. Let's talk to our listeners real quick when it comes to air travel. What is a piece of advice that you would give to someone who's maybe flying for the first time or hasn't flown in a while about, just making the most of it?
well, you're not going to like what I'm going to say. Don't drink alcohol.
Okay.
That's my number one thing. Now, I am a woman who I used to love a glass of wine on the aircraft. Just settles me down for the flight. And maybe it's a young person's game having a drink. But now I'm in my 40s now. If I have a drink on board that aircraft, I feel horrific, even if it's just one. So I would always recommend people, I mean, if you do obviously enjoy responsibly, but just drink plenty of water, try to get as much rest as you can. I know it's hard. And also just be aware that everybody is in that situation as well. It's such a stressful situation being on a plane. You're forced to get to a place at a certain time. There might have been traffic on the way. Then you have to queue up and check in and check your bags and get security searched. And then you're pushed into a room where you have to wait for God knows how long. And then you're kind of shoved into a tin can hurtling through the air for how many ever hours that you are flying. We're all in the same position. And I find that some people try to get really anxious because of those situations, and they can take it out on fellow passengers, but it's just much easier if we all relax, enjoy, and maybe use that time to plan your trip and research your destination and just look forward to getting there and going through that journey.
Absolutely. Yeah. With social media, we tend to see a lot of horror stories, horror videos of things that happen, unruly passengers and things like that. So that
Oh,
it's,
yeah.
and I'm sure there's a little, I'm not going to say wine, we'll blame it on something
No, it's
else.
definitely not. Well, do you know what the main issue is with unruly passengers? And this is now with data that I have this, because I've been on my podcast for a year now. And the most stories that we get from other flight attendants are passengers behaving badly. And 95% of the time, it's because those passengers have mixed alcohol with sleeping tablets. They want to get on the flight and they want to sleep. And they think, I tell you what, I'm going to take this sleeping tablet. They might get a Xanax or even just taking some over-the-counter medication. And then they mix it with alcohol because they think, I'll just have a glass of wine. That'll help me relax even more. The two combined, and especially with the altitude, it can send people absolutely crazy. I've just recorded an episode that will be out already by the time this goes out, about a guy that went around and stole everybody's shoes. because he'd mixed sleeping tablets and alcohol together and it'd just gone crazy. So if you are going to have that glass of wine, just make sure that you're not mixing it with anything else.
I'm hearing you, so I hope everyone is listening to what Allie has to say. Never mix. You don't want to go home with anyone else's shoes.
Yes.
It's a lesson we're going to learn from that. Absolutely. All right. So let's talk a little bit about that podcast. So, as we talked about in the top of the show, it's called the Red Eye Podcast. And on there, you're going to get stories from the perspective of people who work in the airline industry. Stories from you, stories from your guests. Where are you sourcing your guests from, first and foremost?
The podcast itself, it's told in like an audiobook style. So the kind of
Hmm.
short 25-minute audiobooks, basically. But it may need to protect the identities of a lot of the crew members because a lot of them are coming from current crew. I've lived
Yes.
for 14 years, so I have an awful lot of friends and ex-colleagues that have donated stories. But I also work with an author, Kaylee, who is still a flight attendant, and she gets stories every single week. She's still flying internationally, and the minute they get down in that bar after a long shift and everyone's had a glass of wine, the stories start coming out. And we always ask permission, of course, but we've had some crackers that have come out from that, from the shoe stealing situation to a pilot being held hostage in Havana. So we've had all sorts of things come through, but it's been so interesting. And I have people who aren't maybe flight attendants, but they have incredible stories. I spoke to Dave Sanderson, who was on the Hudson River crash, Captain
Mm,
Sully's flight. He was on that flight. You can see
yeah.
him on the wing in the Hudson River. I spoke to him and got his story, which was just incredible. I'd never spoken to anybody that had survived a plane crash before. And even like a few friends of mine who now they know that I'm doing this podcast will say, well, I did tell you about that story I had when the engine set on fire, didn't I? No, but let's get that one on here. So that's another
Absolutely.
episode. So I think everybody has a story. Once you start talking, and it's usually whilst accompanied with a glass of wine, which really helps oil the memories. Everyone's got stories when it comes to travel. If you start thinking about it, there's always something that happened on a trip, because it's not always about what happened on the flight. A lot of it's what happens en route as well. Because
Of
we get,
course.
us crew, we get to stay in these incredible hotels in amazing destinations, and then we're all put together, 15 strangers, and crazy stuff happens.
Well, I can't wait to listen to that episode. I've listened to a few. I haven't gotten to that one yet. And I really do love the format of the show. It's really good. Thinking about the way that you tell your stories and your guests tell your stories, their stories on the podcast, what do you think the key is to telling a good story?
I think the key is in the details. It's
Mhm.
painting a picture. This is why Kaylee's such an amazing writer, Kaylee, who writes the podcast, and I narrate it and produce it. But she's just got an eye for details. And so it's changed the way when I'm collecting stories from crew, or if she's collecting them, we find out all the details. What are you thinking that morning? What was your mood? Had something gone on that day? Because the way that you start your day can often be affected by something that happened yesterday. So we get all the details, the sights, the smells, the noises, the feelings. Having that human connection, that's what's great storytelling. Because if somebody can relate to that, they think, I felt like that, or I've smelt that before, or I've been in that
Mhm.
situation. This is what's great about stories. It's passing on tales that people can relate to, or that will make them laugh, or will help teach them a lesson. That's what's great storytelling, is just connecting with other people.
Yeah, those details absolutely bring it to life. And for the listener, it really helps them imagine it, like reading a book. I know audiobooks are very popular these days, and they do give you a lot of that, that visualization, the
Yeah.
ability to visualize, what the storyteller is saying.
Well, that's what I wanted to do. So I'm a voice actor now. Ironically, I don't do audiobooks because they're so long. I haven't got the time. But I have done a few in the past. But what I wanted to marry up was audiobooks where it is just the narrator's voice painting the picture. And then my
Mhm.
work in audio now with my podcast and my stories, I get to add sound effects and sound design and put music, because I feel like sometimes music, when the right piece of music accompanies the right piece of text,
Mhm.
there's a special magic there. It just elevates emotion, and I think that also helps kind of create an experience for the listener when that music kind of stirs something inside of you whilst you're listening to this story. So I love, it's my favorite part of the job, is putting the right music to the story and getting that magic feeling when I'm doing an episode.
Absolutely, absolutely. Alan Silvestri is an amazing composer. I don't know if you know that name or not. He actually composed a lot of music for the Marvel series. He's an acquaintance because he's in the wine business now as well. He has a winery up in Monterey County, and we worked together and collaborated and so on. He's a super, super great guy, very, very nice guy. But it makes me think of what you're talking about to a movie score. As the Avengers are clashing with their enemy, the music behind it, it really does paint that picture, as you put it, or at least help with the picture. And especially in audio format, I can only imagine that the music adds so much more depth and feeling to it.
Yeah, absolutely.
I love that. Well, let's talk a little bit about your voiceover career. You've done corporate videos and video games. What's your favorite kind of project? What is it that you just absolutely love to do? Can't wait to get into your little cubicle there.
Do you know what's funny? I was thinking about this earlier, and it's not something that anybody, I think, would get excited about. But I love doing commercials because commercials nowadays, there are great writers behind commercials, and they really want to connect properly with their listeners, with their consumers. So they're like mini films now, these little 30-second commercials. And the voice really is important now. It's no longer the come to our store and buy our things. It's a human connection, and you have to put a lot of work into it. You have to put a lot of emotional connection as an actor. It's not necessarily voiceovers anymore, they're voice actors. You have to be the
Hmm.
person that's chatting to a friend, and the friend's like, I don't know what to do, my car's broken down and I need a new car and I don't know what to do. And you go, well, hey, introducing the new Toyota or whatever other cars are available. But introducing this car, this is the one you need, and you speak to them as a person instead of just selling at them. So I really enjoy a commercial now. I think it's because I've been coaching with a wonderful coach recently who's got me all excited about having that connection. So yeah, commercials are my favorite, but I also do love a good video game. I'm not a fan of the big shouty war games, although I have done them. It's not really
Hmm.
my thing. Again, video games nowadays, they're like movies.
Right,
The
right.
detail that goes into the story, and I mean, I'd say probably more work goes into a video game now than in the movies. So I really enjoy getting involved in a really good narrative video game.
I'm not a video game person myself, but just from hearing other people play them and my sisters, and everything, it's there is a lot that goes into it, and I love hearing all of the different voices and the background stories you can get in and everything.
Mm.
It's very, very cool. Do you ever find yourself just out there in real life, doing funny character voices, talking to your pets or talking to your kids?
Yeah, my little boy, I mean, he's my little boy's definitely going to be an actor one day because he's exactly the same without any need. But I was walking out of a store the other day with him. We just bought a little present for my mum. And as we walked out the store, he turns around to the store clerk, does a big bow and goes, "Thank you very much," and then walks out the store. And I was like, "Oh, he's my son," because now we're in the house going, "How very rude. Thank you very much." And, "Who do you think you are?" We do all these little silly characters to each other. When he was younger, though, he used to say, "Stop it, mummy." Like, he didn't like it. If I started doing a different character, he'd be like, "Stop it, mummy. I don't like it. I want you to be mummy."
That's fantastic. Is there anything that you do, maybe a ritual or something like that, that helps you prepare for an upcoming role? Any specific things that you do to get yourself ready?
Yeah, there's a few things before every session, well, not every session, before my day starts. And I
Hmm.
often have to work really early in the day because I'm based on the West Coast, USA right
Hmm.
now. And most of my clients are in Europe still. So by the time I get up, it's late afternoon for them. So I'm usually getting up pretty early to work with them, and I need to warm my voice up. So I stand in the shower with the steam and I do my voice warm-ups going up and down, and I won't
Hmm.
do them now because they're pretty gross, I'll be honest, to listen to. But, loosening up the tongue and the neck and the
Yes.
jaw and the teeth and the throat and everything like that, and making sure that I don't sound like I've just woken up. So I'll do that. If it's anything, because I do on-camera work as well, so if I'm doing anything that involves serious character involvement, either video games, animation, or being on camera, then music is something that actually I listen to I'll have to listen to something specific to my character to get me in a mood. And I'm doing an indie film in a couple of weeks down in Oregon, and I've just been given the music for it, which is amazing because the music, I think, is something that tells a story in itself, and it gets you
Mhm.
in a mood, like I was talking about with the sound design. But even though I'm not a musician, I'm not somebody that, is going to concerts every weekend. In fact, if I'm going for a walk, I'm more likely to put a podcast on than an album.
Mm,
But when it comes to wanting to feel something, then music is something I turn to.
Fantastic. I've often been told that I should go into voiceover work, and I know that a lot of our listeners have probably heard the same thing. What's a piece of advice you would give someone who's just getting into that business?
I'd say join communities in your local area. There's a ton of voiceover communities, and they really are the most welcoming group of people, and they're always willing to share advice. And get coaching. Coaching is really important because, especially since the pandemic, voice actors have quadrupled in size. There's just so many voice actors now, mainly because back in 2020, a lot of actors couldn't work, and so they
Right.
turned to voiceover, and then realized that voiceover is actually a much more lucrative career than acting on stage or screen.
I've
So,
heard that. Yeah.
so there, you stuck with it. So now there's quite a lot of people, and home studios are the norm. I mean, I'm calling in now from my own home studio. So you need somewhere that sounds great inside your house, whether that's under a duvet fort that you've made, or like I have now, I have a custom made booth. But you need training on these things. You need training on the technical side of things. You need training on the vocal technique, and you need training on business because you are a self-employed business person. You've got to go out there and market yourself as well. So get coaching as much as you can. Listen to as many podcasts as you can on the
Mhm.
business and the vocal technique side of voiceover. It really is the most amazing career if you can get into it. So yeah, go for it, I'd say, and see what voice you've got inside you.
There we go. Do you have a particular podcast that you would recommend to the audience?
Yeah, well, for the business side of things, absolutely. Mark Scott, VOpreneur, he's got a fantastic podcast about the business side of voiceover, which
Mhm.
honestly is about 85% of the job. When it comes to vocal technique, you do need personal coaching. But there's some great podcasts out there. J. Michael Collins does a good podcast where he interviews lots of different people. There's another one called Speechless, which is a fantastic podcast where they interview very successful voiceovers and you get to hear their story. Making Waves podcast is another great one. There's quite a lot actually. So just put in voiceover into the search bar and you'll find lots, I'm sure. But yeah, a new one called Voiceover Unplugged. Honestly, there's tons. Have a listen. Listen to people in the business and listen to their stories. And you tend to absorb a lot of information just by listening to their stories.
Most definitely. Well, you've lived such a vibrant and global life, and obviously you have a family. You're here in the States now. How do you work out the work-life balance?
It's really important to do so, and I think it took me going too far the wrong way to to realize that. The biggest thing I'd say is to have boundaries. I don't work weekends unless it's
Mhm.
something I really want to do, but otherwise, my calendar, I'm done by 3 p.m. on a Friday, and then that's me for the weekend. So have boundaries, and also schedule your day well. By that, I mean, obviously get the work that you need to do in, but also schedule an hour for a walk outside, whether
Mhm.
it's raining or sunshine. I live in Seattle, so 90% of the time that's raining.
Right.
But just walking outside for me has done so much good for my soul. I walk for about 45 minutes every morning after I've dropped my kid off at school, and I tend to not listen to music or podcasts in that time. I just listen to what's going on, whether that's the traffic or whether that's the birds and the trees, or walk around the lake and hearing the water lap up. I find it sets my day. Well, the minute I get back, I feel motivated and energized and ready to go. Plus, I've got some steps and I've had some exercise, so that's really good. I just feel like stepping outside your front door, getting fresh air and moving your body is a non-negotiable time in your day. It's just as important as the work. It's just as important as setting aside time for lunch so that you're not just rushing and eating and stuff.
Right.
Set aside a schedule and put your lunch in there so that you can eat and take care of yourself. Because, this is a very big cliche, but, help yourself before helping others because you can't help anyone else if you're not in a good place. It took some time for me to go the wrong way, especially after I became a parent, because
Yeah.
as a parent, you just give everything to your child. So I went too far after that. And then I realized that I couldn't be a great mum or a great voiceover if I wasn't looking after myself. So yeah, it's important. Don't put it to the bottom of the list.
No, I love that. Yeah, work-life balance is so important. Same as you, I've learned that over the years. You know, my son is turned 18 in November and he's now graduating in high school. And, I wish there were some things that were different, from his upbringing, from my side. And there are some things that I regret. So for those of you who are listening, make the most of it, make the most of that home life, work balance, and, make sure that everything's included. I
Yeah.
couldn't agree more.
I found that when I started walking outside, because it's not I only started maybe about a year ago, and it changed everything for me because I had appreciation for really small things, like the sound of a bird or the way that the light drizzle felt on my face. I remember it was raining really lightly once, and I thought, oh, there will be one day in the future when I wish I could feel this rain on my face.
Mm.
And it suddenly made me appreciate everything more. And the small stuff, like my son bugging me about something or not getting the job that I wanted to get, didn't matter as much. Because if you've got appreciation for the small things that come for free in your life, then everything else just seems a little bit easier.
100%. And we've brought this conversation full circle. Get out there and take a walk. Go
Yeah.
experience something new. Go feel the rain and listen to the birds and smell the flowers, whatever, smell the roses,
Yeah.
however you want to put it. Fantastic. I have one last question for you, if you don't mind. If your life was turned into a movie, what would it be called?
Oh my gosh. I think it'd probably be called Diversions because I feel like I've had about 4 different lives so far.
Yes.
I'm a very different person today than I was 10 years ago, and then 10 years before that, and then 10 years before that. And I feel like if you are open to the way that life will point you in a certain way, you can experience great things. You can experience awful things as well, don't get me wrong, but
Of
I
course.
but I feel like if you are open to opportunity and grateful for the things that you have in life, the diversions you get, there's just another turn of the page that's exciting. And I want to be able to get to the very end of my hopefully very long life. I'm talking about 120, it's going to be
Yes.
awesome.
Mhm.
And I'll be healthy and nothing bad would have
Yes.
happened. I'm going to get to that very long life and be able to look back and think, I did it. I took every opportunity that I wanted to take and I made the most of it while I could. So yeah, diversions coming out soon. May
We
25.
can't wait to watch it. We can't wait to watch it. Allie, thank you so much for your time. I really, really appreciate you being on the show and spending some time with us.
It's my pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Of course.
Whew. Huge thanks to the endlessly talented Allie Murphy for joining me on Pour and Explore. I don't know about you, but I could have listened to her stories for hours. From the plane rides gone sideways to rooftop meals in Delhi, the sweet ritual of walking in the rain and finding joy in the smallest of things. And that is certainly what life is all about. What really stood out to me is Allie's idea that every twist and turn in life, every diversion, as she calls it, can lead to magic if we're willing to embrace it. And that's exactly the spirit that I bring to my podcast, everything that I do in life, and of course to my wine tours. The joy of exploration, the power of shared stories, and the thrill of tasting the world one sip, one taste, one bite at a time. Which brings me to this. If Allie's stories sparked your wanderlust, crossing my fingers, I would love for you to join me in 2026 on one or both of my Pour and Explore wine tours. We are heading down under. We're going to New Zealand, we're going to Australia, and these trips are going to be extraordinary. We're going to explore New Zealand's stunning wine regions like Marlborough and Central Otago. Then we're going to fly over to Australia. Again, these are separate tours. We're going to see McLaren Vale, Tasmania's coastal gems. It's really, really going to be a lot of fun. These are not cookie cutter trips. They're immersive, intimate, fully guided by me and my crew on the ground. And we are going to have tastings, vineyard visits, behind the scene experiences that not only connect you with the land, the winemakers, but they're going to connect you to the wine life in the Southern Hemisphere. I'm really, really excited about that. These tours are perfect for the adventurous wine lover, and if you want to experience more than just good wine, you want to experience community, culture, and connection, these are for you. Head over to my website, thewineguy.vin, got great details over there. Thanks for listening, friends. If you enjoyed today's episode, don't forget to subscribe, leave a quick review, and share it with someone who's ready to turn their next diversion into something beautiful. Until next time, keep wondering and wandering. Have a great day.
Thank you so much for tuning into this episode of Pour and Explore. I'd love to hear your thoughts, your stories, and your questions, so you can drop me a line at cheers@thewineguy.vin. That's cheers@thewineguy.vin. Or let's connect on TikTok, Instagram, or Facebook. Grab those links on my website at thewineguy.vin. Until next time, let's keep wondering and wandering. Cheers, everyone.